Welcome to Grief Uprooted, a podcast dedicated to sharing your grief stories. Together, we embark on the mystery of one's grief journey as they learn to live, heal, and be courageous in a world rooted in trauma. Join myself, Christine, in an open discussion to help you uproot the grief in all our lives. I am an award winning author, professional speaker, and humanitarian in the field of grief and trauma. I want you to be part of the discussion. Welcome back to Grief Uprooted. I'm Christine Jornutter-Landon, and I just want to say thank you to all of my followers, all of my listeners. Please click follow. That is the way we're going to reach more people and we're going to bring healing to each other. Grief Uprooted has started to expand beyond my dreams, and I want to extend a huge thank you to you, because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't continue talking. So please do click follow, like us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. I can't think of them all. I also want to say a huge thank you to Dolan, who is my producer, who has walked this path with me. It is amazing to be able to say I have a producer, so that's pretty awesome. So thank you, Dolan, for everything you do. I couldn't do this without you. So let's get started for today's episode. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about something that really is never talked about. I know grief is never talked about, but this grief is really not talked about. And it is grieving how we're aging. Really, in particular, how women are aging and how we embrace that aging. We're diving deep. We're diving into menopause. We're diving into energy, how we change, guilt, shame, all of it. So we'll be welcoming Dr. Lisa Petty, and she will be sharing her expertise, and we'll be exploring all of these areas from the perspective of grief and how that is affecting us and how do we move forward. So let's get started. Thank you so much. Do click follow, and thank you again to everybody. This is a dream come true for me. Take care. Bye. Welcome back to Grief Uprooted. Before I start today, I kind of want to pose a question, perhaps to all the women out there, but I think the men may want to chime in. What happens when you realize you're older, like you're old, and you no longer can have children? You know, there's so many cliches out there that wisdom comes with age. You have a lot of free time. But when we really think about it, is this something we are embracing? Is this something we could possibly be grieving? No more children. You can't make any more. I know some of you out there most probably are going, oh, thank goodness. But some of us are coming to the realization that that was our one and only shot. And when we think about aging, my mind is spinning. So we're going to unpack that today. And I want to introduce you to Dr. Lisa Petty. She has in-depth knowledge of holistic nutrition, years of expertise as a health researcher and educator, and she even has a PhD in midlife women's well-being. So she's also the author of Forget About Having It All. I'm sure your mind is spinning like mine is, because I really want to know where that title came from. I didn't know you could get a PhD in midlife women's well-being. So welcome, Lisa. I'm so excited to have you.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I think we're going to have some fun today.
I think so too. No holds boundaries or bars or however that is. Let's just dive in for it. So I guess first I would love for my audience to kind of know your background. I do believe everybody has a grief journey, no matter what that grief is or what form it comes in. So really, what brought you to want to study this and even obtain a PhD in it?
So that's really interesting because you did ask me to reflect on my grief story. And I have, for various reasons, I've been thinking about what people typically think of as a cause of grief, right? It could be a death in the family. It could be a tragic accident, what have you. And I realized that I haven't had those griefs that a lot of people do have to work through.
Yeah.
But I did have a period of my life where I was very conscious of an ending
Mm.
for me and didn't know what was going to come after that ending. And it's part of the reason, for example, that I have a PhD in women's well-being because as you mentioned, I've worked extensively in natural health and healing and holistic nutrition, and I was all about the body, and proactive aging was my thing, because my goal always has been and will it continues to be. I want to be as healthy as possible for as long as possible. Right? I don't want to be a sick old person. I want to be a very healthy, vibrant old person. And yet, when my youngest child started to apply to university, I saw the writing on the wall. I could see into the future. My clairvoyance kicked in, and I went, holy crap, I'm going to have what they call an empty nest. And it would just be me in the house looking at these four walls.
Yeah.
What does that even mean? And uh, that was happening in my private life. But in my business, I started coming up against women who, again, I always tended to work with women about the same age as me, right? And around midlife, I noticed this trend of women who are saying, well, yes, I want to lose weight or balance my hormones or clear my skin or have more energy or fix my sleep, whatever the physical complaint was. But they never followed through. So I would say, okay, this is a simple example. Can you drink more water? Can you drink 8 glasses of water every day? Yep, totally. Got it. And then the next time we'd get together, I'd say, so how'd you do? And they'd go, yeah, I didn't. I don't know why. I just didn't get around to it or whatever. And this became like, I could almost predict it. Every woman I talked to, they'd be like, yeah, I didn't do it. And
Mhm.
I was thinking, what is going on here where women are saying, yes, this is really important to me, but I'm not going to do anything about it.
Mhm.
Right. So
Yeah.
as a professional, I was like, I'm failing these women. So
Mm.
this is happening in my professional life. Like I can't help and I can't motivate people. Like what do I need to learn? What's missing for me? At the same time, I'm like, holy crap, my youth is over.
Yep.
I'm no longer going to be mama every day. I'm no, nobody, it's different, right? When they get older, it's different. And then the third sort of pillar of this was my body was changing.
Mm. Mm.
And, things that I thought I knew about my body suddenly, like I could sleep ever since, I stopped having tiny, tiny, tiny little people, I could sleep. I predictable sleep. I could always control my weight. As a nutritionist, I ate well, but suddenly my body started doing things that I didn't understand. And even with the resources that I had at my fingertips, I couldn't figure it out. And then it was just like I don't even know who my body I don't even know my body anymore. I don't know my body.
I
I don't
think
know
that
who
sleep, sorry to interrupt you, but that sleep, now that goes across genders. I
that it does.
the sleep for some reason just stops and you wake up at these hours of night that you're like, what the heck am I awake? Why am I awake? What
Why am
like
I trying to solve all the world's
yeah.
problems
And
now?
your
Yeah.
mind is spinning and spinning and spinning. I think for myself that by far has been such a challenge for me. But go on.
Yeah. Very common. So those are the three columns. And I realized, so I decided to go to university, get my first, it was my master's degree. What's going on with these women and their food and why aren't they doing what they say they want to do? So I studied health behavior change, got a sense of that.
Is this after the children left the home?
Because yes, because I'm
Oh.
like, I don't want to be by myself because if I'm by myself in this house,
Yep.
my imagination is going to take over and all I'm going to do is worry and I'm going to think, I'm wasting my time.
Yeah.
The
Yep.
voices. Everybody's listening,
Chatter.
know the voices I'm talking about and what they're saying. And it's never nice. It's never, you're amazing. It's
Yeah.
what are you doing now?
Yeah.
Right.
I need to
And
be productive.
so I thought I'd try and get ahead of it by going to. I got my master's degree, and then I was like, okay, I'm sucked right in here, and I continued because so the first question had to do with women, midlife women, and their eating behavior. And then I took it further and I'm like, well, that's just one aspect of taking care of yourself. There's a whole bunch more.
Mm-hmm.
So let's figure out what's getting in the way of all of it.
Yeah.
What's getting in the way of all of it? So that was sort of why I ended up getting the PhD. And it's in applied health sciences, by the way, but I say that it's in women's well-being because that was the topic.
Yeah.
Um, but I realized as I was going through this, I was mourning who I was.
Mm.
And I was noticing there's a contrast that women go through, and I can only speak to women's experiences, right? And men, I'm not discounting your experience, but I can't speak to it.
Don't worry. We love all the men out there. We love them all.
Yes. Um, you notice things like I walked into a room and nobody even noticed I was there.
Mhm.
I would speak and nobody would hear me.
Mhm.
That kind of invisibility that started to kick up. And this is from, I mean, I've always been a talker. I've always been a public speaker. I've been a media personality on the radio, on the television. I was used to people noticing that I was in the room.
Mhm.
And this for me was it was a death. It really was a death. Like
Mm.
she's gone.
Yeah.
That person is gone. And then menopause happened and I'm like, but I maybe want more children. I didn't want more children. But when you know you can't,
Yeah.
it's like, well, maybe I'm not done yet, right? And so then particularly in our culture that idolizes youth, if you're not young
Mhm.
and if you aren't fertile,
Mhm.
then you don't matter.
Yep.
And that's the messaging everywhere.
And I'm going to interject here because I was the woman who decided she was going to get knocked up at 40. So I had two children, and I'll never forget being in New York and standing on a street corner, literally having a meltdown. And my kids are looking at me as teenagers and my husband, and I'm like, what do I do with my life? I'm not needed anymore. Even though I have a career, even though I've been doing all this stuff, and I want another baby. My son went, she's gone crazy, she's gone mad. And I loved what my daughter said. How does this affect me financially? And I pissed myself laughing. And I was like, that's our girl. And, so then I decided at 40, and I did get pregnant, and I do have a beautiful 12-year-old now. But what I found so like, and I find it challenging because she'll come home and say, like, all the moms are in their 30s. And then she'll say, but don't worry, mom, they think you're cool. You ride a motorcycle and everything. And I'm just laughing. I'm like, I get it. I'm a little more wrinklier than them. And
Right.
I'm at a different stage of life. But I did not want to accept this was over. I tried to have another child after Cora, and it wouldn't happen. And that
Right.
was a process that, I remember going to a fertility clinic and going, no, this can't be over. Like, I want this. And Christine always gets what she wants.
Right, right. Well,
And
that's part of your identity, right? If I just work hard enough, I'm guessing,
I'm going to, yeah,
I get what I want because I know what's required.
yep. And
Well, no, Christine, that's not happening.
yes. And that was something beyond me. There was no fix for this. And
Right,
I know that a lot of people and friends and medical people were like, you're insane. Why are you having this baby? And then to boot, I decided to spit it out in the living room in front of the do it yourself channel with my whole family. And, this was my third. I had done all the research and the precautions that I needed to do. Don't suggest it for people with their first children or if it's not for them, but it was for me.
right,
But I just remember, now here I sit in my 50s and I'm exhausted and we're becoming a teenager. But it was like I did. I'm going to admit it. I wanted to
right.
prolong that time because I
Well,
just loved it.
and I did too. I mean, I
Mm,
loved it was such an important part of my identity and
mm,
lots of women feel this way and lots of women don't. So if you don't, I'm not judging. I'm just telling my story and my story was I loved it.
yeah,
I loved being I was up, my son was a rower, and we were up at 4 o'clock going to, what do they call it? Where they row, the rowing place. We were going there at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I remember when he we have graduated licensing here. So he wasn't allowed to drive himself, even though he had a car, right? Because it was dark or whatever the rules were. And I remember sort of the last time I was driving him at 4 o'clock in the morning, I was sad, thinking this is it. Like
Yep.
this is coming to an end for me.
Yeah.
And so I think what I want to share, what the point I want to make is that this is not acknowledged in our culture, that at some point in a woman's life particularly, and again, I can only speak to women, we realize we are no longer 27. And 27, by the way, seems to be the number that people keep in their head when they look in the mirror and they're like, wait a second, that's not what I look like. Because in your head, you're 27. You're just perfect, right? You're just perfect. And yeah, so we hear about the physical symptoms of menopause. We hear about the weight gain and the sleep and the mood changes and all of that kind of thing, but we don't talk enough, I think, about the grief and depression and sadness, which is not the same as grief, that comes with
Mhm.
knowing that that part of your life is over, whether or not you had children, whether or not you want more children.
Mhm.
There's a whole bunch of chemical things happening in your body too that impact it, like when your estrogen changes or whatever. It changes how your brain works. It
Mhm.
changes how you perceive things. Like it is literally a life change
Mhm.
that all menopausal women have gone through. And that experience is not acknowledged in our culture. So that's what I really wanted to share, as a grief story for people who think, oh, grief doesn't really apply to me. Thank goodness I have been blessed,
Mhm.
you know. And as I was reflecting the other day, I had my nanny. So my great grandmother died when I was very, very young, like 5. And then I had all of my important people in my life until I was well in my 50s. So I had no traumatic
Mhm.
grief story. However, I think that this idea of aging in a culture that idolizes youth,
Mhm.
is one that needs to be talked more about.
Totally agree. And I think what happens too is that, imagine that mother who's had miscarriage over miscarriage, or that mother whose child has died and now is hitting this point. You
Yes,
know, that is where, we got to look at grief and the compounded grief and how
absolutely. It would be what like an echo,
exactly.
right?
And I
You
think a
you
lot, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I love where you were going.
Well, I just like that, you get through the grief as much as you would get through it, say it happened 20 years ago. But
Mhm.
then now you're in your 50s, you're going to go through it again. You're going to go through
Exactly.
it for the child that you lost and the children that will never be,
Yes.
and that 27-year-old you.
Yep.
You have to let her go.
Yep. And this is where I find that compounded grief. And then if we have intergenerational grief, like, mom could only have one child, or your siblings had passed or died, there's all these things that come into play. And we are just sitting here, and I think society's sitting here going, hey, you don't have your period anymore. Yeehaw. Well, what about the fact that you're dry as a bone, you're sweating to death, and you're having these hot flashes? And I loved that I was with interviewing uh, some elders, and they were way past the menopause state. And they said, wait till your sex drive comes back. And I'm like, what? Right.
What?
So that happens. And so you're like, you're looking at all this and going, to society, this is like, hey, bonus time, no period, then you're also going, wait a second, like, why can't we acknowledge, one, the value of aging?
Yes.
I have people who are doing injections to continue to get their period, because that once we do hit that menopause, we do dry up. Our skin dries up. Everything dries up. And
Yeah.
we're, going into a new transition, which can be just as beautiful as the first one.
Which
But
is where, thank goodness,
mhm,
I finally got to.
mhm,
But it was that challenge. It was that letting go of who she was, who I was, right? Just releasing that younger person
mhm,
and embracing the beauty of aging. Now, I don't call myself old. There are, and it's not because I'm diminishing it. It's
mhm,
because there's beauty in old too. And so I want uh, people to just acknowledge this midlife experience, and what I mean by that is what is in between youth and old,
mhm.
because this is when, particularly for women, we can finally get around to doing the things
Yeah.
that we came here to do, but we didn't get to do because we were doing what everybody else told us we should be doing,
Boy, oh boy, is that true.
which is, by the way, the thing that gets in the way of women taking care of their well being.
Yeah.
There is my doctorate in a sentence. The
I love it.
reason women don't look after themselves is because they're too busy being concerned about what they're supposed to be doing, who they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to look like, how they're supposed to act, what they're supposed to think. It uses up so much mental energy
Mhm,
thinking about everybody else
mhm,
and all the rules that women are depleted, exhausted, feel shame, feel guilt
mhm,
because we can never measure up to those standards
mhm.
that has been, have been prescribed by the fashion magazines and the media and our youth obsessed culture, right?
And even our
And
nurture, the way we were raised, we were
particularly
raised in the
Generation
70s.
X,
Yeah.
right? Which is the generation that I am. We were raised on Cosmopolitan magazine and Glamour and um, those magazines that had the half naked women on the front cover all the time. And we thought that that's what we were supposed to do. Well, those women don't even look like that, right? So, and now the next wave is coming in with AI. Don't get me started, but I will say one thing, people just tweaking
Yeah.
their images and whatever. I'm like, guys, no, this isn't healthy.
No.
This, can we please
Mhm,
just embrace who we are? Can we please embrace the process? Can we please pull our energy back in from everybody else,
mhm,
going all those different directions, bring it back into ourselves?
mhm.
Because that's where the power is.
But I think what comes with that is an enormous amount of guilt. I think that when, and I'm speaking of personal experience here and working one on one with grief coaching and working with people is when women, and obviously I embrace men, but in this instance, um, we really hit this place where we're like, I feel guilty. I feel guilty
We're
letting,
supposed to. That's what the programming is. If you
well,
look in the
yes.
media, you look at the stories, they're always telling us we're not good enough. And what are you going to do about it?
And you have to be taking care of these children. You have to be taking care of the husband. And I heard this. I loved this one saying I heard was, we are married multiple times and it can be to the same person.
Mhm.
And I thought that is so true. But I also believe we are multiple people in the same life. And
Yes,
that transition, if embraced, can be beautiful. I know,
absolutely.
and so many times in my career, it's a hard career. I've been deployed. I aid in world tragedies. I see things that I think sometimes I wish I never saw.
Hmm.
But I remember walking away from my career and I decided to sell lingerie, which is hilarious, but I do love lingerie. And so, and I started working for a larger corporation and I was doing excellent, but I I really took things farther. Like in my mind, well, we could be on the radio for Valentine's Day. We can do this. Like the marketing part of it was what I loved, and I thought this will be great. And the head boss came in and they fired. And I was devastated because I thought, well, this career gives me more time for my family, less trauma in my life. I can spend more time on what I'm supposed to be doing in society. And when they went to talk to me, they said, have you ever met somebody who's had cancer? And I was like, yeah. And what is their perception of the world afterwards? And I'm like, anything. Once you're sick or you have cancer and you've survived and you're a survivor, you're going to run a race. You're going to want to raise money for people. You, a lot of people, not everyone, really start to live. And they said, it's like you had cancer. You don't give a crap about underwear. What you care about is making a difference in the world. This job isn't for you. You're way beyond it. You're wanting to you're wanting to make it this wonderful thing. And they had a structure in place.
They just wanted to sell underwear.
That's exactly it. They just wanted to sell underwear. And I walked out so feeling like I failed. And then I had to re-look at this and go, did you? Did all of a sudden something step in and go, what the hell are you doing? Why are you running away from your career? And then, I went right back and went, this is where I belong. This
Yes,
this isn't
yes.
trauma to me. This is helping people. This is growing. So,
Yes. And so I love that story. And so it does tie into where I wanted to get to today, sort of that hope phase. And that's that, as women get older and we need to embrace our wisdom and we need, this is what I'm all about. Like, let's embrace what we know and let's tune into our intuition and let's use all of these ways of knowing that we have at our disposal that we've been told, don't do that. That's not logical, whatever. That story is a beautiful story that illustrates how, whatever you want to call it, God's source, the universe, the
mhm,
divine plan, whatever it was, smacked you upside the head and said, what are you doing? Were, you came here with gifts
mhm,
and, and, a perspective and an ability to help people in really vulnerable, life altering, challenging experiences. You can make it better for them. Why are you selling underwear? And thank goodness they fired you. Now, in the moment, you're probably like, ego would be like, what? And then there would have been a little bit of fear around, oh, paycheck. But at the same time,
yeah,
that was the universe saying,
no.
do you not know? Do you not know what you're good at? Like, we're going to tell you now because that was fun and you had that little distraction and, just buy yourself nice lingerie. You don't have to actually sell it, but you're here for something else,
Yeah. And I think
right?
recognizing those signs. But I guess what I would love to kind of talk about, because this seems to really be prevalent in the grieving process. I believe that with grief, there's normalization, and that is kind of understanding where you're at presently and
Hmm.
normalizing it with both ends of those spectrum.
Hmm.
That um, it is something that we integrate into who we are. It isn't something we just get over. And then
Right.
we put in some self stabilizing techniques to help us through our day. But when it comes to guilt and shame, these are two elements, especially for women, that with midlife and we're moving forward, even though those children are out and we don't have to take care of them on a regular basis, there's still this guilt that I'm taking care of me. And it should be a time we're embracing and loving,
Right.
but we're not. And
Right.
I struggle and wonder why we're not. Like, why
Well,
are we
again, it goes
not
back
jumping
to,
off the
yeah, we're programmed. Like, and when I say programmed, I mean, we get messages all the time on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, on in movies, in television programs about what a woman is supposed to act like.
Mhm,
And it's sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, right? So it's okay to be overweight, but don't be overweight. And
mhm,
it's okay to be athletic, but don't be too athletic.
Mhm.
And it's, it's okay to go to yoga, but not when the kids need dinner. Like it's constant give with one hand, take with the other.
Yeah.
And we need to, first of all, acknowledge it, just notice it. I think that's step one, is to notice how often
Mm-hmm.
forces outside of ourselves tell us what is right and what we should be doing. And if we could, first of all, notice, and then I think that this, when you're in a grief phase, you just said this as well. You have to acknowledge it. You have to feel it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think too, going through the midlife, perimenopause, menopausal experience, aging, whatever you want to call it, you have to acknowledge it. You have to acknowledge the pain. You have to acknowledge the sadness. If you can't close that chapter, you can't move on.
Mm.
Right. And so you have to write a love letter to that part of your life and tell it what joy it gave you and heartache and all of it, but what you're going to miss and what you loved and what you're going to carry forward
Mm-hmm.
into the next phase. And then, don't close the book tight, but close the book. And
Mm-hmm.
only when you do that can you move on to, okay, now what? Right. So I think so acknowledging is step one. And then that sort of self reflection, which moves into just noticing.
Mm-hmm.
Because as I said, I mean, what gets in the way of women taking care of themselves is all that social programming
Mm-hmm.
telling us, feel guilty, be ashamed. And those are the big ones. Those are the top ones, actually. Guilt and shame are the number two, one and two negative emotions that control women's behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And so as an intellectual person, you can sit with that and think, where am I letting shame run my life? Where am I letting guilt run my life? And this sort of ties in with also understanding your values, right? And this is something, how did I get to the title of a book, Forget About Having It All? I'll tell you that story right now, particularly for women in Generation X. So we were brought up with that idea, you can have it all.
Yeah.
There was a famous book by Helen Gurley Brown called You Can Have It All. And we were given this prescription, go out there, find your mate, get a high paying career, have your kids, have a McMansion of a house. Everybody needs a new car. You have to be in the nicest clothes all the time. And you have to take several vacations a year. And you have to always have the newest, greatest, because you can have it all, right? So just keep accumulating and of course, keep going up in your career, but you better raise your kids right and don't let a nanny take care of them, for goodness sake. Like, what? It's ridiculous. And we didn't question it. And
Yeah.
we didn't have mentors going, "Oh, sweetie, that's not possible."
Mm-hmm.
Right? Nobody said to us, "What are you trying to do?
Yeah.
That is insane. You can't do that." And I'm not saying that we can't have the life that we want.
Mm-hmm.
That is what my whole business is on. It's like, dream your life into being. What do you want? What I'm saying is you can't have what everybody else wants you to want. And
So
that's
good.
where
So
That's where
good.
we get in trouble. That's where we get adrenal fatigue, because we're trying to live everybody else's definition of
That's
the
right.
dream life and success and what have you. So my book, which is based on my doctoral research, Forget About Having It All. The tagline of that is, and create the life you dream of, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So forget about what everybody else says you should have,
Yeah.
because you won't. So you'll feel guilty or you'll feel shame because you're not going to measure up because it's impossible. Let's just sweep that all off the table,
Yeah.
get back into who we are,
Mm-hmm.
because now we don't have kids pulling at the hem, right? We don't
Yeah.
have kids bind or skirt. We don't have to make, you know, 3 meals a day. Like, we don't have to do all that anymore. If that was part of your experience, we have an opportunity to just, okay, wait a second.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, oh, yeah, honey, you can have it all. Wouldn't it have been great if, when we were in our 20s, someone said, so what would you like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? So when you get to midlife and that part of your life is behind you
Yeah.
and you've mourned it and you've loved it and you've let it go, now's the time to ask the question, what would I like?
Yeah. It's so good. And I remember in the 70s and 80s, And it was just coming out that it was okay for moms to have jobs and children at home. And I remember my first book when it took off, it was written Where's Robert as a labor of love for myself. And then over 6,000 copies were used for September 11th terrorist attacks. So this launched me from, a hairdresser who wrote a book to boom, right on like TV. And I remember this lady walking in and she became my nanny. And she was like, I'm here to help you and I want to be part of what you're doing. And I remember thinking, I can't get a nanny. This is horrible. Like, and then I remember her dropping the children off at school and all the moms whispering, like, oh, she has a nanny. And I really went through this, like, should I be there doing? And then I thought, you know what? I'm okay with somebody helping me out. I'm okay with somebody doing, the vacuuming and helping me so that I can spend time with my children more and accepting that this was the path I was being led on, not one I was particularly prepared for nor wanted. I was very, very shocked. It was like all of a sudden this awakening happened to me, and it was like, this is your job. And I'm like, I have no education in this. I have, what the hell? And then to be deployed and standing in front of thousands and thousands of people and having someone go, share your story. And I'm like, are you crazy? And it's like, trust me, you have this ability. And I started talking. And that's when I went, okay, this isn't about me per se and what was expected, get married, have the children, have that perfect home, just exactly what you were saying. I was like, there's a bigger purpose here. And somehow, and I do believe it's the tragic death of my brother falling over Niagara Falls Gorge that as a young girl awoke in me.
We interrupt this podcast for a dirty moment.
Welcome back to A Dirty Moment. I want you to just take a moment and think about 5 people in your life. 5 people. You could possibly have 5 children and you spend every day with them. You could have a combination of coworkers, spouses, friends, colleagues. And how do these 5 people impact you? Do they bring good energy, negative energy? Do they bring healing? Do they bring conversation? Our lives are really molded by who we spend our time with. So just take this dirty moment and look at how you spend your time and who you spend your time with. Take that moment just to realize what is affecting you and how it is affecting you. Dirty moments happen, and that's okay. Sometimes we're just meant to see things a little bit clearer. Look at the 5 people in your life and ask yourself how they're impacting you. Take care. And I bottled and bottled and bottled. And it wasn't until I went, I need the answer of where Robert is. And I found him in me. And that expanded my whole awareness. So when we talk about going like exactly what your book is about, how do we get there? How do we start that step to go, how do I awaken myself? Like I love it in the beginning, you talked about the lady drinking the water.
Yes.
I call myself the 2-week wonder. And I know everybody listening is going, yeah, how the hell do we drink the water or not eat the bad food? Because I'm 2 weeks in and then I fall. No idea why 2 weeks. I've timed it, tried to figure it out. But, even starting there, like, how do we awaken that?
Well, I think if someone is asking the question, they're already awakening. If
Good.
you know, if they're starting to say, well, what's next for me and what is my purpose and
Mm,
how can I be healthier? And I think that that's the important question, not how do I lose the weight or how do, it's how can I be healthier? And if your goal is always to be a better version of yourself
yeah.
and sets you on fire,
Mhm.
you're going to do it, right? And so how do I be healthier? And then the other thing I think is, don't bite off too much.
Mm.
Like, it's the other thing we do. Okay, it's all or nothing. You're either on your diet or you're a loser, right? No, no. You're on your diet, and every day you're going to make choices.
Yeah.
And some of them are going to support you. So here's a story I like to tell. You know, Michelangelo and his story of carving out David. Have you heard this story?
No.
So apparently, you know, when they're carving, they have like a pillar of marble, we'll say.
Mm.
And someone said, how are you able to carve David out of that piece of marble? And he said, David was there and I just revealed him.
Mm.
And so it makes me think, so every time you make a choice, you're either chipping away the marble that's going to reveal your David,
Mm.
or you're not. And that's all it is. So your choices are really, I mean, choices are the most important thing. Choice is decision plus action, right? We make decisions all the time. Oh, yeah, I'm going to lose weight. And then we choose to go to McDonald's, right? So choice is decision plus action. So how we choose creates our experience. And so I think that that's important. If you're already having the awakening, you don't have to have a crisis in your life to have an awakening.
Mm.
Please don't wait until there's a tragedy. Please don't. You know, as you were saying, people are get diagnoses and then suddenly they're like, oh, but wait, I have so much to do. I have, you know, whatever. Don't wait for the diagnosis, right? What kind of life would you like to have for yourself? And if it's not the one you currently have, you've got data, right? So you just write down what that vision is. What would make your heart sing? Because if you can imagine it, this is the other thing. Imagination is a really powerful form of intuition.
Mm.
You can imagine it. That didn't come from your logical brain. That came from another dimension that you cannot see, you cannot feel, you cannot touch, but it exists.
Yes.
And so write down what you imagine and then make choices every day that align with creating that reality for yourself. And again, it's not super overwhelming, right? I mean, it does help when you have a map. It does help when you sort of have a guide and you understand that that vision for your future is sort of a map, you know? I think the challenge for women a lot of the time is we've been told so much about who we are and how we act and what we should say and, you know, all of these kinds of things that we don't really know who we are anymore. And again, going back to midlife, it's a beautiful opportunity for a tabula rasa, like just clean the slate, start all over again, and let go of grief and shame, because they're the lowest level energies that exist on the planet and you don't deserve them, right? If you punch somebody in the arm and you hurt them, well, yeah, you should feel guilty, but also apologize, right? And then it's done. And don't punch them again because we need to learn from our mistakes, right? But there's very little that we do in our lifetime that we need to feel guilt for or shame about, right? It's just, and shame always comes from outside of you. Guilt is, you know, when you make a mistake, you have guilt or you don't. Shame comes from you not measuring up to somebody else's expectation of you. So get rid of the shame. It's not even yours.
And I have to say, it goes back to that nurturing, because that was a thing they did back then. If you were in school and you did something wrong, you were guilty. You know, you were sat in the
and then you were shamed. You were put in the corner with a dunce
dunce
cap.
hat on. Right? And now we look at it and people go, well, what's wrong? You were put in the corner and put something on your head that made you look like you're guilty. And
Yes.
so you were shamed for that. And then our generation is sitting here going, well, I don't understand why I feel this way. And, you know, you start to ponder your own self and go, well, I remember being that girl. Like, in my educational background, I'm dyslexic. And so I was placed in the special learning disability class. And, you know, everybody's like, I constantly struggle with thinking I'm not very intelligent. And mind you, eventually I went back to university and I have all this stuff, and people are like, why do you think that? And I think, well, I was labeled that. I was the SLD kid. And we were not in the same class as everybody. And our class existed of 8 children, right? So we were centered out. And so, it's crazy how all that impacts you. And when
And
you
those are very deep wounding. So I
Mm,
also practice shamanic healing. And those woundings are not just in your physical body, but they're in your mental body, your emotional body, and your spiritual body. If you think about your aura, you carry those until you heal them.
mhm,
And not only that, if you don't heal them, the next 7 generations are going to inherit that pain that you did not heal.
mhm,
So if you don't love yourself enough to
mhm.
heal, how about the next 7 generations
Yeah.
of your family? It also goes 7 generations backwards. You can heal 7 generations backwards. But I mean, it's so important to look at those occasions like, whoa, when do the wearing a dunce cap? Well, that just happened when you were 7. No, I'm still carrying that pain. I'm still carrying that wound. And that's going to impact your decisions. Am I smart enough to make that choice? Am I smart enough to have that job? Well, maybe
Mhm,
I should just have this. I'm not going to try for that promotion because I'm not smart enough. And somebody better, there's
mm.
somebody better for that than me. I mean, it's constant. And you don't consciously go, oh, that's because the teacher put me in the corner. It's like, no, 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 no. You carried the emotional wound of that and
Mhm.
it became part of your decision-making process.
It does. And I think the physical body, a lot of times we're in our conscious mind, but our unconscious and our physical body, our physical body, it always floors me where people are like, I have muscle memory. Well, guess what? You have memory of all kinds. You have emotional memory
Yes.
too. And this is all
Yes.
being carried in our bodies. So when we're triggered, we end up going, hey, I don't understand why I feel like this. And, anniversary dates of when somebody died, or just all sorts of things that trigger you. That's your physical body and your unconscious mind going, hey, I've been here, I've done this, what's going on? When I was working in Indigenous reserves the last year with Camp SOAR, which was a grief camp, Spirits Our Ancestors Rekindled, that I developed, and we worked in these reserves. One of the things we talked about was that intergenerational grief. And it was like, how about your children and your grandchildren moving forward? How do we fix this or make it better? And one of the best things I really loved was when an elder looked over and said, we've opened the door. We started talking. And it goes to exactly what you were saying, just acknowledging it exists. That might have only been where we're going to start, but hopefully that next generation is going to take that and open the door much wider. And we're going to start talking about it. Um, Lends completely to what you're saying. The other part that I just kind of wanted to touch on, because I did Google you, your website and everything, was I noticed you talked about chakras and energy sessions, and I can't say it, Akashic.
Akashic records.
Okay,
Yes.
yes. And I was just
Yes.
wondering, like, I meditate on my chakras often. I love using stones and all those type of things. And energy. I firm believer that yes, I'm definitely a high energy. All of you tell me that all the time, and I'm always vibrating at a very high energy. Um, and I realize that the people in our lives we want to keep within roughly the same energy. Sometimes it's hard when you're in a room and it can be exhausting sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just how that affects us with us aging, like, um, you know, having those friends, because now our children are pretty much gone and we
Yes.
are rebuilding a life for ourselves. We are either reconnecting with people from high school, or we're creating new friendship groups and joining things on Meetup. And so it's really the energy and how to kind of meditate on this, and go forward from there.
Well, so going back to what you said earlier about the importance of the
Hmm.
physical body is like an antenna, and we receive lots of information from the environment through our physical bodies. And all you need to do is think about our language, like the English language. We have expressions like I felt it in my gut,
Mm.
or I knew it in my heart. And hopefully, people who are listening go, oh, I know what that means. I know what that means. So you walk into a room using your example, and there is a heavy, dark cloud over in the corner, and you just feel it wherever you feel it because it's different from other people. I feel it in my second chakra, just this, which is between your navel and your sit bone, right? Sort of right in the middle there, just this heaviness like a rock. And I'm like, ooh, I'm not going to go over there, right? That person does not resonate with me. They are not of a good vibration for me. And my body picked it up. Important to understand that we think in our culture, we think our brain makes all the choices. No, 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 no. The brain is the last place. So there's an information highway from your gut through your heart up to your brain. And 90% of the information in your body travels from your gut to your heart to your brain, not the other way around. So your gut and your heart give your brain some information, and then the brain makes a decision. Okay, I've got all the information. Cool. This is what we're going to do. But it doesn't make those choices without the information provided by the rest of the body. So it could be that the hair stands up on the back. You know, you're walking down a dark alley and you're like, holy crap, I'm going to run now, right? Or whatever it is, we need to tune back into our bodies. That's part of it. We need to become intimately familiar with what our body is trying to tell us all the time, not just with what foods we're eating and whether they're good for us, but as we're going through this process of who am I now and what do I want and who do I want in my environment and what do I want my life to be like? Do you want to be with the people who make you feel like you've got rocks in your gut? Or do you want to be with the people who make you feel whatever joy feels like in your body? If it's a flutter in your heart, if it's you feel tingly all over, if you feel warm, if you want to dance, whatever joy feels like, who do you want to be with? Rock guy or, joy person, right? So again, those are ways to help us let go of what everybody else says you're supposed to have, the way you're supposed to be, the way you're supposed to act, and tune into, well, what do I want? Who do I want to be with? What do I want to surround? How do I want to eat? How do I want to feel? Right? Just connecting back into that is really an important part of that whole letting go and reframing going forward.
Makes so much sense. And that guy in the corner might resonate with somebody else. Their energy may match. And that's
Yes.
often where I think people go wrong, where they think, well, that I feel a negative energy. So, and all that really means is they're not vibrating where you are. And that's
Right.
okay. That might be for somebody else. And I often see when working with couples that this happens as the woman starts to age and embrace herself. So I'm going to go there for my listeners is a lot of us have been married for numerous decades, and all of a sudden you're hitting this age element in menopause and you start finding yourself and you start growing, and that growing can happen so quickly. I've seen with my clients and went, whoa. And you know they'll grow so quick, and then their spouse is down here and they're up here, and you see that disconnect. um, but it is because aging is being embraced on one side and discovery is happening, and on the other side that person is still going at that same energy. Do you find that happens?
Well, again, I don't work with couples,
Mm,
but what I think might be happening is that when women finally embrace it, yay, here I go. This is my time, right? And I have a group called Wisdom Becomes Her, and that is sort of the tagline. It's time, right? And it's all about women who are ready to embrace who they are
mm-hmm,
and let's kick it. So when a woman is there, when she's like, it's my time, I'm going, right? She's going to step into new territory for her because let's face it, women, we still do 70% of the domestic chores, right? We do 90% of the mental labor. Mental labor is who's going to take Johnny to the dentist because I have, Kathy's got to be at dance class, right? We do that. We do that. And it's exhausting. So we get to a point where we're not doing that 70-90 stuff anymore. And we get to act like the potential spouse who
mm-hmm,
has been acting his whole life,
mm-hmm,
right? He goes to work, he has his Thursday hockey with the guys, whatever. His life doesn't change so much,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
And the woman is like, my world just opened up.
Yeah.
Look at this free time. What is this? Right. And so I can see that that could be where his life isn't changing so much and hers is just like, whoa,
Yeah.
it's my time.
And there's
I'm
that.
going. And are you coming or not? Right?
Yeah. And at certain points I've seen where the poor man has went, I'm super jealous. You got all this time. Then I've seen like, well, what is she doing? She's gone crazy. Like she's, you hear all these things and bringing them back or trying to say, look, this is the next marriage. This is we either
Yes.
decide to stay in the marriage. The couple have to make that decision. Like, is this where you want to be? This is
Yes.
this is how your wife or spouse is evolving.
Yes.
And that evolution for that woman is so beautiful to watch. But I can also see the torment and the guilt and the I shouldn't be doing this. And
Yeah.
it's just really fascinating.
And
Because
I think part of that too, that guilt
Mhm.
of my husband and I have nothing in common anymore kind of thing. Well, I think the marriage till death do us part thing happened when people died at 52,
Yes.
right? Instead, like it was menopause and death instead of menopause and a whole 30 more years of life.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that it takes a really special couple having honest heart to heart
Hmm.
conversations, which I don't think a lot of couples do,
Hmm.
from the outside looking in. I think that there's a lot of stepping around
Hmm.
difficult conversations. If you want your marriage to last, then both people,
Gotta be it.
you have to have those hard conversations in
Yeah.
order to get the beautiful outcome that you want, right?
Hmm.
So that's a little off my expertise, but that's sort of me outside looking in,
Yeah.
um,
Well, and it's all
thinking
fun
what's
to
important.
kind of
Yeah.
explore, and that's exactly what this is. It's just uprooting things. Doesn't mean we have the answers and of everything, but I think just being able to support each other and have that conversation, like just uproot it and let's talk about it. People will chime in for sure. So if we wanted to get your book, how do we get your book?
The book is available on Amazon, but I invite folks to come to my website, soulgardening.ca, and have a look around. I have other podcasts there as well. I have a blog that I try to commit to once a week doing something. And I have, as I said, I have the Women Becomes Her movement and podcast as well. And if anyone wants to learn about shamanic healing or the Akashic records, which, by the way, for anyone who is wondering, I
Mhm,
don't know what's the point, what's the purpose,
mhm,
because that's a big thing at midlife too. When you go, I want a legacy. There's got to be a point to this,
mhm.
right? It's part of where the fear kicks in because you're just like, I can't do this for another 30 years. There's
Yeah.
got to be more, right? And the Akashic records help you to understand who you are at soul level,
Yeah.
meaning not you came here to be a grief counselor or a grief teacher, but you came here to be this kind of a person with this kind of light and energy. And
Mm,
how can you move, use what interests you
mhm.
and your gifts to create the life that you're looking for. So folks find that I find it fascinating
Yeah, that
and really
sounds
helpful. And it helps to also reveal some of those woundings as well.
yeah.
And once we can clear those woundings and put practices into place
Mhm.
to not fall back into old habits,
Yeah.
we can see a lot of change.
And we need that when we get to this stage in life because it's a clearing again.
It is a
Yeah,
clearing and it's exciting.
it
And
is.
aging is a beautiful gift because what is the alternative?
This is true.
So we might as well embrace aging and be joyful and, be as healthy as possible for as long as possible.
On that note, I can't thank you enough, Lisa. It's just been such a great topic to explore. So, all of you out there, if you have any questions or concerns, I know you'll be sending them in. Dr. Lisa Petty, I'm sure you'll come back and we can
Yeah,
answer
it was
some of those
great.
questions. Do visit the website. What was it again?
Soulgardening.ca.
Oh, love it. Soulgardening.ca. Isn't that's beautiful. So everybody out there, thanks for tuning in. Remember that grief is something we do together. We do not heal alone. We heal together. Until next time, take care. Bye, everybody. Grief Uprooted professional grief and empowerment coaching are not to be used as a substitute for professional advice by legal, medical, financial, business, spiritual, or other qualified professionals. All our products and services are designed for grief empowerment through learning and sharing of one's lived experiences.